Okay, well, that was, we're back. Really excited to be at London Craft Week again. It's year 3 for us doing this. And I think what's exciting for Vigour and Skills is that every year our schedule of makers through their live demonstrations and talks gets busier and busier. And this season, we've got a whole new series of makers telling us a little bit about their stories. Today we've got Fiona Chivers, artist Fiona Chivers, and we're going to be discussing motherhood and making. That wasn't the idea behind our talk, but we realized as mothers when we were discussing this talk and the interview and just our day-to-day running of, small businesses and working with creatives, that this whole role of being a mother played a huge part in maybe why we've ended up doing what we're doing and how it affects the journey. And Vigour and Skills is all about the story of our makers. So that's it. Here's Fiona.
Hello.
And just to get the ball rolling, can you tell us a bit about your background? Because it's really eclectic. I mean, it doesn't just start with art.
It is really eclectic. So I started as a dancer. I was a professional dancer, and that was my life passion. I think I kind of moved from a very small child, and actually I did always paint as well. Then I got quite badly injured. I had a sort of series of ongoing foot injuries. And so eventually I just thought I'm going to go back to college and retrain. And I went to Rose Bruford College, which is a theatre school, and I did a degree in theatre design, which went really well. And I think possibly because I had already this background in performance, that I kind of understood what it was to be on stage. So theatre design was quite immersive for me. But towards the end of my degree, I did start dancing again. I didn't think I would, but I did. So then I ended up in this sort of strange situation where I won quite a big national prize for theatre design. But at the same time, I got a job dancing. And so probably for 20 years, maybe not quite 20, maybe 15, I kind of juggled the two, and I would have periods where I was dancing, touring a lot, and then in between I might go back to theatre design, and I mean, to the point I did a bit of musical theatre, and also worked with a big dance company, and we had quite a lot of time during the day, so I would kind of be in the dressing room doing my set designs, like, building model boxes, and then I'd manage to take time off when it was a production week. But eventually I decided I wasn't going to do any more performing, and I would focus more on the theatre design side of things.
Theatre, to me, just having people knowing people in theatre, it is such a company lifestyle. It is a community. You have to be very dedicated to the lifestyle, the people that you work with, but it is hard to get that time alone, probably. So it's funny going into something like art. It makes sense hearing your story that it would lead you into something a little bit more quiet, maybe. No?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I met my husband. We were both at St Martin's doing an MA, because when I said no more dancing, I went back to St Martin's, and then I got another dancing job and went and did some more dancing. So it's really, I mean, there's no question, my path was mad, and every time I said I'm not doing that again, I did it again. And
never say never.
Yeah, my husband, he really wanted to move to Cornwall and start a family, and I wanted to start a family, and theatre just didn't work for us. I couldn't exactly that thing. I couldn't have kind of two families.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think the theatre thing is interesting, and the idea of family, because quite often when you leave a job, it disperses and you don't see those people again, because what you had in common was the work that you were doing in that moment. So it's so intense and the relationships are so strong, but then they've kind of gone sometimes. So I think for me, Cornwall was a really good place to start start a family, and yeah, that quiet
That's
time.
really the transition then, isn't it? It's starting the family and just moving
Yeah.
away from,
Yeah.
I love how you said it is a family in its own right, the Theatreland, and going into your own family. So beginning of your sort of artistic career, what was inspiring you to paint?
Well, I've always painted, and kind of in two ways. I had a very sort of emotive type of painting, which I think kind of bring to figure and skills, actually, that's perhaps a bit darker and more expressive. And then another side of my painting that's more delicate and decorative. And actually, all through being a student, I always painted, maybe for like interior designers who would say, can we have something to match these cushions? So I worked with, there was a little shop in Islington actually back in the early 90s that I used to do paintings for them. So I've always painted, and a huge part of the theatre design is, for me, was painting. I don't really work digitally, so I always created a full set of costume paintings that only really ever got seen by the director and the production group. So that was kind of strange. I've got portfolios and portfolios of unseen drawings and paintings. But it was actually then the lockdown for me.
Really? Yeah.
I lost my theatre work, and in a way it was a relief, because I'd really struggled to balance family life with theatre, and the jobs that I was doing were becoming less and less satisfying. So I hope no one's listening that I've worked with, but it's true. I mean, financially, they were not very rewarding, and also creatively, they were not very rewarding. And then also a very close friend of mine from childhood, who I used to swim with, she died of breast cancer, and it really struck a nerve with me. And I just thought, kind of get over yourself and get your paintings out there. And very quickly I started to sell work.
It's been really quick, because I knew about Fiona through, I remember the first time I saw your work was at something at Babington House, and the lovely girls from Wilding, I think you designed their invite. And I remember going to see my friend in her jumpsuits and seeing this picture of these women swimming, which we don't really do on Vigor and Skills, you're swimming women, do we? And it's such a brilliant, because there's a whole sort of mad following behind this amazing sort of well-being experience. And I said to the girls, oh, I love this. And then serendipitously, Alice Sykes, lovely, who does biology, mentioned you to me about doing some invite. And then before I knew it, I was just lost in all these works going, I love it. But we weren't even thinking about Vigor and Skills at the time. I don't know what happened. And then you sort of just blew up, and you were everywhere. And even people that have been here keep going, I recognize this work. There's a sort of look that's really coming across, I think. Yeah. People recognize it.
I mean, I think a lot of the paintings I do are kind of out of Cornwall, but I think there's also a narrative. So there's the really soft watercolours, and then the ink work that I did for Wilding. I think a lot of people really like that. So because it looks a bit like block printing, except it's not, they're ink paintings. So.
And these women are fabulous. They're really cool. They're just sort of, it's like, who did invite you to do that? So I guess, because the next thing I was going to ask you is the balance now. Is there a difference? Obviously, your children are older. We've had COVID, and you are now, this is what you do. How do you balance your career as an artist and motherhood and family? How's that changed?
I think painting, it is much easier for me to be in control of, because I can, I can set an alarm and I can get up and I can paint. I can paint into the night. And also, I do commission work, but I have found more than anything, if I just paint, people then respond to the paintings, and they either find themselves in it, or they kind of, for whatever reason, they fall in love with a painting. Whereas with the theatre, I was quite often having to rework things because the cast would change. You've designed something for a tall, thin woman, and then they say, actually, we've got a guy is going to play that role after all, and that's very hard if I work in a very, like I said, a really immersive way. So once I'd kind of, drilled down into the characters or the setting for each scene, I found it really hard to be asked to completely rework stuff. But a lot of what I did was that. And I found that stressful. Whereas I don't find painting stressful, even if there's a deadline. And I think that has come out of the theatre work, because I had to work to very tight deadlines in a way that most painters don't have to. So I can produce work quite quickly.
My sister-in-law, she's a painter, she's an artist, and she says that when she started, and she was an actress, weirdly, so same thing, just the relief, And she said this wonderful thing once, and it sort of touches on that. She goes, when I started painting, there's like this aha moment where it's like you go into almost like a meditative state. And I think how wonderful to have something that just, and you can see her work, and I can see with your work, there's something that you can just go somewhere. And what a wonderful thing to be able to do, to have. I think a lot of the makers, that's when you really see the most incredible, you see it. It's like you've gone somewhere. And I think when you've got a client or somebody that you're working for, you are constantly starting, you're creative. You can only go so far, but then you have to create boundaries for yourself. And that must be very frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And I think I definitely paint depending on my mood. So there are some days where, try as I might, I could not paint a happy woman,
Yeah.
And I might be having a great day, but something that's hitting the page is kind of heavy and weighty. And other days, everything is kind of pinging around on the page. So I think that's quite hard when someone says, I really like this painting, but if you do something similar, but in, this is the lake I swim in, I find they don't work.
If you were to give now, other mothers advice on, I guess, the struggle, or women who are more struggling to find the balance between the two, between being an artist or whatever it may be and motherhood, what advice would you give them?
I think to keep going, even if it's tiny incremental steps, to keep that passion sort of going.
Positive,
yeah. I think the other thing is my husband, I may not show it, but he's very, very supportive. We're both freelance. And so generally, we work at different times, but sometimes all the work comes in together. That is a nightmare. I think having good childcare, which I don't really have because I don't have family nearby. But I think having the confidence in whoever it is that's looking after your children, so that you don't feel constantly guilty.
I think I'm sure everyone here understands that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is for just doing craft week. I've got my wonderful in-laws, and they're with our children now, and I'm really enjoying Bigger in Skills.
Yeah.
And of course I always do, but there can be this pull and tug, and I'll stay at home and work from here. You go off and it's complicated.
Yeah, and I think unless you can let go, sometimes you can't thrive yourself, and then it just becomes this sort of tumbleweed of stress and anxiety, and then the kids pick up on it, and then you spill the ink, and everything goes wrong.
It really does.
The house of chaos.
The house of chaos.
So I think carving out time as well. I'm quite disciplined about always having painting time.
You have to be, I think, also. I mean, one does anyway. I think freelancers, artists, I can't speak for every artist, but, I imagine, but when children are in play, you have to be so strict with your time. You really learn what organization means.
Yeah.
Because if not, you just don't get any
and also engaging them. I think engaging children with what you do is helpful, and working with them. I do kind of share painting or making with them quite a lot. And we used to always, when they were little, kind of drag them round. You know, they'd be sitting in a corner now, or I like always had them in a rucksack or a papoose when they were babies, and that was like, you know, Inigo the theatre baby, or so and so the festival kid. But as they've got older, I have found I cannot do that. So I think it's that thing of the constant change.
Well, they're changing. They're with every year they're different.
Quickly.
So your role as a mother changes. And then, you know, we were talking now because I said to Fiona before we started, you know, let's relax. We're just going to tell you a story. We'll get into motherhood, and of course, Vigor and Skills is very much about the story of makers behind their collections. Like, who are these people that are making these things? And you said the story changes because sort of the older you get, the more of a maker you become. Your story just gets longer and longer and bigger and bigger and different.
Really
you know, and that's, you know, you have to update it. You know, there's not just one story, and that's, I think, also with motherhood and children, isn't it? It's constantly changing. Just when you figured out one way to get the balance right, they become 10 or a teenager.
Or a teenager that needs to be driven to work, and they don't understand that you're facilitating everything that they do.
Do you have a particular project or piece of art that you're specifically very proud of?
I've just been working on a really nice project with a PhD student called Eva McGrath, who has been taking a series of photographs and poetry and researching the impact of cold water, particularly on pregnant women. And the photographs are beautiful, actually. And she asked me to do some paintings, and that's been really, really interesting for me, because I'm quite a long way away from pregnancy now, but kind of going into that place. And I think that the whole kind of wateriness of pregnancy, but actually our dog's just given birth, so I've been really immersed in pregnancy.
I've been looking at puppy pictures. I've been looking at puppy pictures recently because, you know, I guess, yes, being pregnant is quite far away now. And I think, oh, little puppies, you know. And so, sorry, last question, but what are some of your future goals and aspirations as an artist?
Well, two things.
Okay.
One is I would really like to kind of license some work so that I could have a little pocket of commercial work that sustains me, because I struggle to make money really to live. So that's like one little side thing, and that's the kind of commercial business side of me, kind of saying, how can I make what I do work for my family in that way? But the other side is I would like to do some really big work, and I've been kind of building up to it for a long time, and I want to experiment. I work a lot with watercolours and inks, and I would like to experiment with some really big sort of clay boards so that I can potentially work at any scale, because lots of people have been asking for huge seaweeds or really big fish, and I think it would be kind of a challenge to kind of keep the same level of detail that's on the small work, but sort of expand it. But so that's
exciting. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's
and very
exciting.
sensible. You've got one sort of commercial idea and one creative, because I think that's the fine line also with makers and artists. Something that's come up recently with a friend of mine. She's a ceramicist, and she is a ceramicist, and the difference between being a maker and an artist, I asked her, because we were in talks, you know, we've known each other a very long time, Vigor and Skills, and, you know, as a maker, and then I had this sort of moment with her and her experience and her story, and I asked her, I said, what is the difference between being described as a maker and an artist? And sorry, it's completely off topic, and we haven't discussed this as being part of the questions, but what's your take on that? Do people call you an artist, a maker?
So I think for me, there's a sort of, again, it's that separation. There's a side of me which I think is the maker, that really cares about the craft of what I do, the kind of the finish, the finesse, the quality, that other people will find it pleasing. And then there's the artist side of me that I can't swear properly, can I? But that really doesn't give a thing about it. It's like, this is like, it's coming out, like it's coming out of me, and it might be grotesque, it might be beautiful, but it's the bit that has to not care. So I think there are two things, and I like both. I really like both aspects. I really love doing the sort of pretty, delicate stuff, and I don't think it's kind of dumbing down what to do, because it's really is an aspect of me.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful way to put it, actually. Yes, but because I've just watched now, and we're early days. We're 3 years into sort of creating this world, and I've learned through working with makers, because I came out of the fashion industry, so I understand that being tied to an industry and a family and coming out, and it's much more esoteric for a start. It's much more free, I guess you could say. And I didn't know that people could live so freely, I guess, in their creativity. And I think there's a huge support behind London Craft Week to really kind of expose now the wonder of living as a maker and an artist. But in the few years of Vigor and Skills, it's just something that plays in my mind, like, what's the difference between a maker and an artist? And is there one? And I think it's just what you said now. Going there then. Well, that's it as far as questions. Do you guys have any questions for Fiona?
Actually, yeah. Well, you spoke so beautifully about your trajectory, your non-linear trajectory and transition from your theater work to work as a painter and artist. And I'm just wondering, like, was there a time when you could not make because of the children coming into your life? For me, as a mother, when I had both kids at a very young age, I just couldn't find like an anchor or like mental space to be able to express myself creatively at all.
Before you answer, I'm just going to repeat it just for the microphone to pick it up. So basically the question is that, has there been a time throughout your time as a mother and with small children, or whatever age it may be, that you felt, I guess, stuck in mud to go on to sort of that creative level? And
if yes, how did you emerge?
And how did you emerge from that?
I think, I mean, it's a word I quite often find myself using, is capacity. That thing of you just think, I want to do this, but I do not have the capacity. And definitely for me, so the dancing and the theatre work, they took me away in a way that I had no control over. I had to be there. And my husband would say, it's not life or death, it's just a job. But actually, and that's something strangely that COVID changed. It stopped those things being like a matter of life or death. But I do think I never stopped finding ways to be creative. And I probably parent quite creatively, a lot of people would say. They were like, at one point, they were my mission. But I think it's okay to stop as well. That's one of the things. It's okay for there not to be capacity. It's okay to say, this moment, I'm storing up. I'm like a bulb under the ground, and I'm like really fueling up. And when you might just get a few green shoots, but at some point you're going to get the massive, shoot of blooms. And I'm just a ball of creativity waiting to express myself. And I think fatherhood is probably challenging as well, in that same way. But I think it takes from your body as well. Like being a mother drains your, and I know I'm going back to our dog, which is quite embarrassing. Probably I might regret it, but you've never seen it with our dog. She is just
Depleted.
exhausted and depleted. It's
going to
take
bandwidth
her
for it.
And so I think keep doing little bits though, like keep planting the seeds.
And not giving yourself a hard time, I think. I think that's something with, I watch, having come from the fashion industry, watching sort of the designers after their experience, the pressure that you put on, it catches up because everything's just shifted in your body and your mind. And it comes back slowly, slowly. But in that interim time where you're not quite there, it's just, you meet it with all these different kind of expectations. You thought, it's very confusing. And I think that's a lovely thing. It's okay to stop. Stop and just do what you need to do to be the mummy right now, and then
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
Because you probably need to stop. The other thing I found really helpful is finding older men or women, like much older artists who are still working. And I found that really reassuring to find, people who've actually started again at 50 and then still produce this incredible body of challenging contemporary work. I think there's that feeling that you've got to come, if you've been at art school, you've got to come out of art college and then you've got 10 years to make it. And I just don't think
exactly. That's
creativity's like that.
No, and then I agree, some of the women I'm most inspired by in art world have sort of had their 3 babies, and the option of being as successful as they are now was never really part of the conversation as that time as mother, and they weren't even looking for that. But they've come out the other side, and that bulb that was there has just shot out, and nobody ever would have thought that, but it's happened, and it's really exciting. It's very inspiring. Thank you, Fiona. That's wonderful. That's our first interview for the Craft Week. Oh, it's loud. Great. Thank you.